pardon my cursories, but holy fucking shit! Edgar Wright has left Ant-Man. Or rather, they left each other. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Film Feast. My name is Sam Donchis, I am your host, and I have to get right to this story because it is a long one with lots of bumps and bruises and pain. And it's just like that. Edgar Wright is off Ant-Man. And I know this is old news, catch-up edition and all that, but this is my vlog. This is a story that I really have been meaning to talk about and kind of itching to talk about in the worst way because I hate it. I hate everything about this story. Edgar Wright, director of Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, one of my favorite movies of all time, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and most recently The World's End, was planning on directing the Ant-Man movie for Marvel and Disney, and he had been writing it and working on it for years now. And just like that, Marvel sort of pulled the rug out from under him. And again, this was a script that Edgar Wright had been working on painstakingly for years. You know, from the very early years of Marvel Studios building up the Avengers Initiative and all that, even working on it through 2 productions of his. You know, right after Hot Fuzz ended, he started on this thing and was working on it through Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and The World's End. Clearly, Kevin Feige wanted this film to get made the right way, and so he kind of just like played ball with Edgar Wright and just made sure to incubate it over the years. And 2 years ago at Comic-Con, Marvel even announced that Ant-Man was slated for July of 2015 to basically close out Phase 2 right after Avengers Age of Ultron. And they had most of their cast already rounded out, including Michael Douglas and Paul Rudd as the title role. So why would Marvel do something like this? And my only guess is Disney. Clearly, the powers that be did not like Edgar Wright's script, finding it possibly too dark, too adult, maybe? I don't know. In The Lone Ranger, a dude eats another dude's heart. Not like an off-screen chomp, like a fucking... I really don't know. But Marvel basically presented this rewritten script to Edgar Wright and asked him, hey, would you direct this script? And he said no. And they said, okay, well, that's it then. And that's just so sad. I mean, even the press release that they sent out said that Edgar Wright and Marvel went in separate directions because of creative differences. And I don't know, maybe one day we'll find out all of the secret intricacies about this deal, but probably not. The fallout from this news was huge. It shook every corner of the internet except maybe the corner that doesn't like Edgar Wright movies, and I don't like that corner. Now you know why I don't hang out in that corner. I thought, holy shit, the cast is definitely gonna drop out when you know, they're just a few months off from shooting and the director is basically booted? What the fuck? The fantastic cinematographer Bill Pope did leave the project, but the cast stuck around because Marvel assured them everything's gonna be alright guys, it's gonna be cool. Within a week, Marvel opened up negotiations with director Adam McKay and closed on him for director and rewriter of Ant-Man. Adam McKay has directed films like Talladega Nights, Anchorman, and Step Brothers. So he definitely has his comedy chops for the most part, as well as having a fairly good relationship with actor Paul Rudd. And then he exited negotiations for director as well, like right after it was announced that he would direct the film. After that, as well as Drew Goddard's exit from the Daredevil series, people were like, come on, Marvel. What are you guys doing? Marvel basically fell back onto their other choices of Ruben Fleischer, director of Zombieland, and Rawson Marshall Thurber, who directed We're the Millers. I'm not saying that they were getting desperate, but it seemed like they were getting a little desperate. But after 2.5 weeks of searching, they finally found their director in Peyton Reed. And if you're like me, at first you were probably wondering, who? Peyton Reed is most notably credited for directing Bring It On and Yes Man. I've never seen Yes Man, but I've heard some good things. Not enough, but some. But I get down with Bring It On any day of the week. It's been probably 10 years since I've seen it in whole, but I remember it being fairly decent for its time, you know, 2000. I'll probably have to watch it again, as well as Yes Man and another film he directed, The Breakup. Ugh. Adam McKay will remain on the film as a writer, and most likely we'll see Edgar Wright and Joe Cornish receive their credit as screenwriters as well. And after all was said and done, Marvel finally released the first synopsis for Ant-Man, which reads, con man Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, must aid his mentor, Dr. Hank Pym, played by Michael Douglas, in safeguarding the mystery of the Ant-Man technology, which allows its user to decrease in size but increase in strength, from various menaces and plot a caper to defend the Earth. To me, that sounds like Marvel is still managing to step out of its comfort zone, even though they've gone to crazy places like other realms with Thor and literal other galaxies with Guardians of the Galaxy. But I'm just not convinced the film will have the same bite as it would if Edgar Wright was directing it. As some of you may know, Edgar Wright is one of my favorite directors, and I think a lot of people who love film share the appreciation for what he does with his directing. Each film he directs is smarter, more clever, funnier, and punchier than the last. I would even go as far as to say that he is one of the smartest directors of my generation. Really, my interest in the film has made a 180. I'm not interested in it at all anymore, unless I find something in Peyton Reed's movies that I'm like, oh wow, this is really cool, he did this thing, and maybe he'll be able to do something else awesome with Ant-Man. But let's be realistic, that probably won't happen. So yeah, Ant-Man, that sucks, right? Hey guys, it's been a couple of weeks since I shot that video that you were just watching, and there have been some developments in that story over the past couple of weeks. Not so much news, but it is big. It's Kevin Feige, the CEO of Marvel Studios, talking about what's gone down with the whole Edgar Wright, Peyton Reed situation. In a recent interview with Empire Online, Feige spoke about Edgar Wright leaving the project, just saying that it was sort of a long time coming and that they had had a lot of small disagreements about the script over time. Eventually, Feige just felt more comfortable moving the script to a different writer, saying, hey, could you change just the kind of the overall skeleton? Or at least that's what I'm kind of reading between the lines about, because obviously I don't think Feige would just bring a script to someone and say, change this whole thing. Feige clearly had his sensibilities for how he wanted the movie to be made for Marvel, but Feige is kind of representing Disney through Marvel. And I'm thinking, again, a lot of the things that Edgar Wright put in the script were maybe too mature, and the themes were just a little bit too complicated for what they wanted in a Marvel movie. So Feige had the thankless job of saying, we can't make this movie. Kevin Feige also spoke with IGN recently about Peyton Reed and what he would be bringing to the film. He had been wanting to work with Peyton Reed for a while, because apparently Peyton Reed was originally attached to direct the Fantastic Four movie in the early 2000s, but for one reason or another, that didn't work out. He left that movie, but Feige stayed in contact with him, and even brought him on to pitch for Guardians of the Galaxy, and he liked his ideas for it, but turns out James Gunn had better ideas, so he kind of put him on standby for later. And now Peyton Reed is being brought on for Ant-Man, but only after a few other directors were tapped for the job. But you never know, that could just be news getting their sources wrong, but it could also be Feige trying to play things up a little bit. And of course, Feige is only going to say encouraging things about Peyton Reed doing Ant-Man. Since recording the initial Ant-Man episode of the Film Feast, I've had a little bit of a change of heart. Not a big one, I haven't, 180'd back around to absolutely being stoked for Ant-Man like I was when Edgar Wright was directing it, but I do feel a little differently about it. Should we be all that worried about Peyton Reed directing Ant-Man? I think not. Look at the Russo brothers and Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Their pedigree wasn't really action movie oriented, and that movie turned out great. For a lot of people, The Winter Soldier is their favorite Marvel movie to date. Personally, it's my second favorite after the Avengers, but it's still really good, and the Russo brothers were a huge surprise hit. And I'm really excited that they are being tapped for Captain America 3. So why can't we also be excited for what Peyton Reed will do for Ant-Man? Feige has gone on to say that a lot of the spirit that Edgar Wright imbued into the script is still there. How much of that spirit was unlovingly cut out piece by piece? We'll never know, because that's bad PR. Obviously, it's still a bit of a letdown that Edgar Wright is no longer directing Ant-Man, but we should open ourselves up to the fact that he's still directing, period. He's not quitting and he's not dead, and eventually he will open up his awesomeness with new content for the rest of the world and won't have to stick to some rigid Marvel structure where he has to open up the cinematic universe and do all these things with the characters that isn't really going to fit the movie. Don't get me wrong, I love Marvel movies, but Edgar Wright doing his own thing is way, way better. I have linked you in the D box to both of the interviews that Kevin Feige did, one with Empire Online and IGN, about the subjects that I've talked about in this back half of this episode. Thank you guys for watching, and join me on the next episode of The Film Feast, where I will be talking about the Star Wars spin-off movies and the guys who are directing them. I think it's safe to say that Gambit is one of the most popular X-Men characters, which is why it should come to no surprise to anyone that when the movies first started coming out, people wanted to see Gambit on screen. After 3 main X-Men films, Gambit finally appeared on screen in X-Men Origins Wolverine, played by Taylor Kitsch. The few scenes he did have were arguably some of the best in the movie, but considering the fact that X-Men Origins Wolverine is one of the worst films in the franchise, and probably one of the worst films I've ever seen, that's not saying much. I don't hate Taylor Kitsch, but he is no Cajun actor, not even a Cajun impersonator. In fact, I think he was solely chosen for the role of Gambit based on his role on Friday Night Lights, where he played a Texan.
Texas forever.
He is Canadian. So that version of Gambit was ultimately a failure. And back then, I feel like we lived in a time where if a studio messed up a character from a previous entity like a comic book or a video game, that was it. They were done. They were never coming back again.